Hello world, welcome to my channel, Proteus Augustus. I'm an artist, scientist, and American Constitutionist. Today is May 3rd, 2020. In this video, I would like to talk a little bit about what a falsification analysis is. Now, people do this all the time in their daily lives when they make decisions, or at least I hope they do. But I just want to try to bring it more into focus from a scientist's point of view. Now, before I do that, I don't particularly think it's really important to talk about what paper I have. I mean, if someone was really interested in countermanding my argument, then they could do so from a logical standpoint. And if it was going to go so deep as to get into specifics with respect to scientific tenets and theory and whatnot, then so be it. But in this video, I'm trying to keep it a little bit more colloquial, okay? But nevertheless, I do have a degree in chemistry. I have well over 20 years of analytical experience and QA experience. I've written QA manuals. I've been in charge of safety programs. And I'm also well versed in chemical hygiene and biosafety level hygiene as well. Now, putting that aside, again, I want to give you a baseline with respect to what a falsification analysis is before I get into my example. And to do that, again, I'm going to fall back on my own experiences that I think you can relate to. Now let's go back to the Wayback Machine to when I was like 7. Now, like most of you, from a Judeo-Christian perspective, at least in the 60s when I was growing up, there's the concept of Santa Claus. Now, when I was 7, well, by the time I was 4.5, I was on my first plane, so I knew what flying through the air was. So by the time I was 7, I really knew that there was no Santa Claus, but my mother didn't want me to tell my sister. Now, let me explain to you how I figured that one out. Now, first of all, like I said, I was in a plane before, and, when I was 4.5, so by the time I was 5, 6, I knew that there was no way some old fat man with white hair was flying through the air in a sled with a bunch of mammals pulling it. It was impossible. Like I said, I don't have a mystical mind. Okay, I have an analytical mind. So I knew that that was impossible. Okay, but nevertheless, when I came to about 7, I've had pretty much enough of it, And so we go to the store, and Santa Claus, the kids are sitting on the knee, and they're taking pictures and whatnot. Well, at that point I wasn't having it no more, So I says, there's no Santa Claus, Mom. I know that. And of course, she wants to keep it rolling because in her mind, it makes the season pleasurable. And I can understand it. And at the time when I was a kid, I didn't really understand what she was getting out of it. The way I looked at it was pretty much a challenge to my intellectual capacity. And at that point, I've already realized that a lot of people around me weren't really answering my questions. And I went to books and other things or other people like at school to try to get clarification on things. In any event, so I says to her, I said, listen, I'm not going to sit on this guy's knee. Well, why not? I'm like, he's just some guy, with a red suit. I know there's no Santa Claus. So how do you know that? Well, listen, all the shopping we've done for the last week, they got a an old fat guy in a red suit in every store. They can't all be Santa Claus. So, she's like, okay, don't tell your sister. All right. So, anyways, I think most people could, at some point in their life, realize that there wasn't a Santa Claus. Now, listen, if my mother told me, okay, there's no Santa Claus, it's basically the concept, and he represents the concept of giving or something like that, then I'm okay with that. But to continue to try to tell me, like I said, this guy was Santa Claus and he's driving around and one night giving presents there, I wasn't having it. Okay, so that's my baseline. I think that anybody watching this video can realize that that's basically a falsification analysis. Okay, a person puts forth a postulate or a theory or an idea, whatever nomenclature you want, okay? And they say, I'm saying this is what this is, okay? And so in order to prove or disprove, you have to do what's called a falsification analysis. Now, that's a falsification analysis. Now let's go to the more scientific definition. When you start getting into science, it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more different levels as far as mathematics, and there's a lot more discrete understanding of things. Okay? An example, when they tell you about pH in high school, or, there's probably some kids today that are learning it earlier than high school. They're talking about the molar concentration of a proton versus a hydroxyl. Well, that's really not the whole picture. Okay, but, you can put a meter in there and you could, so some people get the idea that that's all that pH is, but that's really not what it is. Okay, and so when you go to the university and you study solution chemistry in a lot more detail, you start to realize that there's this thing called activity. All right, and this is a value that's given to certain elements on the periodic table. So when they are dissolved in water, that's part of the equation, without getting into more detail. So the reason why I'm using this as an example is because I'm trying to explain to you that the level that you have to go in science to falsify something. So yeah, they might give you a real simple explanation about what pH is, and you can work with that. But when you get more advanced, I really don't understand why they don't tell you that from the beginning. But if you put a piece of metal in the water, it can also adjust the pH. Maybe very little, but it can also adjust the pH. Any cation or anion in solution can adjust the pH, right? But they don't call it pH, okay? It's the activity of the ions in the solution, basically. All right, so you would have a P, calcium, an activity constant, and then you would calculate, the log of that solution to give you a value, okay? Because it interferes with, or it reacts with, the aqueous solution. Of course, pH also happens in organic solutions, but let's just leave it at that for now. Now, more advanced people, you could also look at, let's say, a Christoffel symbol. Now, to the layperson, it looks like a lowercase r, right? But if you really wanted to know what a Christoffel symbol is, you really have to get into like 16 different equations that may boil down to 10, okay? All right. So my point is, in science, you have to keep digging deeper and deeper until you get to the point where you are certain that something is true or isn't true. So Today, what I want to do is talk a little bit about, this controversy with respect to wearing a mask. Okay, so like Santa Claus, I've had just about enough that I can take with respect to this debate on whether a mask can protect you from the pathogen that we're currently dealing with. Now, the first thing I have to do is look at the N95 mask that everybody should be familiar with now. And if you acquire one of these, it has to have a printout on it to inform you of what it is. That's a requirement. So if I was to look at this mask, this one's made by 3M, and it's made pursuant to 820D NIOSH. That means that's a standard 820D, National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health. Okay? Now, if you were to Google that, and the standard would come up because it's a government document, it has to be available to the public. At least I believe so. Anyways, once you get your hands on that, anybody that has an average intellect can read this standard, and it'll tell you what the purpose of it is, how to construct it, and what quality tests it has to pass in order to be certified as indeed the product that it says it is. Very simple. And what you will find out is these masks were constructed to protect your respiratory tract from certain size particles, whether they be dust particles that are from, calcium carbonate, or, from sheetrock or whatever, the chalk is, from wood dust, and other particles of that size. Okay? Now, once you read that, you will see that. It's very simple. So right off the bat, you'll be able to see that this mask is to protect your respiratory tract from these dust particles, not to protect the dust particles from you. Now, what happened was, when they start talking about these N95 masks for the healthcare workers, all right, this product was made for construction persons. But a virus is basically a particle. It's not alive. It is a package of information, basically, okay, that can get passed on due to a person or some other entity propelling it to another host, okay? And they are of a certain particle size. So knowing this, they wanted to use these N95 masks. Reason being, the surgical masks were intended in that specific case to protect an open wound from the doctors and nurses, okay? From their respiratory tract or any bacteria that may come from it finding its way into the wound that's infecting the patient. That's basic hygiene for that process, okay? Now, the two are very different, okay? You can't say that the N95 mask is used to protect other people from you. That's not what it's designed for, okay? A surgical mask can protect another person from you if you're operating on them, okay? Now, since the beginning, I knew this. So I had some of these N95 masks, and because I follow these kinds of things, I was wearing this mask like the last week of January. Now, everybody else, unfortunately, was going by what Mr. Fauci and Dr. Birx were telling everybody, and the Surgeon General of the United States. And I'm like, what's going on here? I mean, this is like telling an AIDS patient or a person that wants to have sexual relations not to wear a condom because they're only 90%, they're only 90%, 95% effective or whatever they are. So why wear them? You could still get it, right? You can still get gonorrhea, well, we got some penicillin for that, right? This is the problem, right, that I'm looking at, okay? Now, if they came out and said, look we got an issue because our manufacturing facilities in this country are in China, and we only have certain N95 masks that we need for the healthcare workers to protect them from these particulates so that they can deal with the patients and not get infected. That's one thing. That's called honesty. Okay? That's called honesty. It's a total other ball game to tell the whole population that, no, you don't need these masks. Okay? They're not going to protect you, blah, blah, blah. They come out with this big story. Listen, if you've been aware of what's going on, I don't need to get into that. And so in order to falsify that argument, you have to understand what these things mean. So eventually what happens is they come out, the Surgeon General comes out and says, oh, well, you can make your own mask, but it's still not to protect you. It's to protect other people from you. That's dishonest. It's ridiculous from the get-go. These people are supposed to be smart human beings. So let's just say that they know their business. Okay, like I know my business. Why would they tell everybody not to protect themselves? Like I said, when HIV came out, people were told to wear condoms. Well, even before HIV. Okay, well, before that it was even known. The whole purpose of a condom wasn't just to protect you from impregnating a woman. It was also to protect you from sexually transmitted diseases. They didn't say don't wear a condom because it's only 95% no, listen, it's all hogwash. So you have to ask yourself, why are they saying this? Why are they saying this? Now, there's plenty of people on YouTube that will give you certain theories if you really want to find out. I'm not going to get into that. I basically know that they're telling you bullshit. Okay? They should have told people to wear masks from the get-go. They were doing it in 1918. And you know what? Taiwan didn't do anything special. They just started wearing masks because they got beat up by the SARS and they know what these communists are doing over there. And there's so many of them, they're on top of each other. And just by regular routine, a lot of people don't want to get sick. That's why you always see these people with masks on. So it wasn't something culturally different to them. Once they got a heads up on what was happening in China, everybody's getting issued masks. That's why their levels are low. Because if it can't get into your respiratory tract or through your eyes, you can't get it. It's as simple as that. But you got the Trudeau administration in Canada, you got the WHO, and we have these deep state health professionals that have been there for 50 years that got their hands in all kinds of monetary incentive. Let's just leave it at that. Telling everybody not to wear masks. That's a different falsification analysis in its own. I'll leave that up to you. Why would they do this? So anyways, as it works out, that's what a falsification analysis is. All right? The bottom line is a mask will protect you from these particulates because they are so tiny, but they are encased in vapor. or in water droplets, which increases the size or the diameter of the particle that's hitting the mask. Okay? Is it 100%? No, it's not 100%. If you don't use the mask properly, if you don't disinfect your mask, which you could do by putting it in the oven at 185 for a half hour. I've done it several times on one mask. Of course, you can only do it so many times before it starts to degrade. You got to move on to another mask. Whole different conversation. But it will help people get on with life. And it will help people protect themselves 95%. At least. If you don't get it into your you could get it into your digestive tract if you put your finger in your mouth. Okay? It's not all about breathing it in with this thing. This isn't the flu. And you know, based on its affinity for the ACE2 receptor from that S protein, which is basically on just about every epithelial cell in your body, okay, it also seems to be attacked in the blood corpuscle, okay, and also the leukocytes, all right? It just finds its way into your lungs a lot faster. So there may be a question as to whether you have a cut and you come into contact with your bloodstream, if that's good enough. Now that requires a lot more work. The bottom line is, you got to wear a mask if you want to get on with life, okay? The other thing is with respect to these vaccines, okay? Why doesn't somebody ask these people a straight up question with respect to the efficacy of a flu vaccine? All right, the bottom line is viruses don't have vaccines. I mean, you know, they changed the definition in the Merriam-Webster that a vaccine's not a panacea, but it helps your immune system get stronger. But the way they talk about it, well, you can't go back to work until you get a vaccine. As though once you have a vaccine, that's going to protect you from, no. Vaccines, a flu vaccine ain't going to stop you from getting the flu. Okay? And at 17% effective, maybe 40% even, you can do the same thing with your immune system. You're going to get sick. Okay? So, that's a whole nother story, but if you really want to dig down and find out what's really going on, do your own falsification analysis, right? Find out about how effective a vaccine is, all right, and whether it's going to prevent you from getting sick or not, and why it is that these people also want to push this vaccine on you. Like I said, there's plenty of people talking about these things that have PhDs, and I'm on the same level with them. I just got tired of chasing paper. But because I don't have that paper, I have to compel you to look into this on your own and look at some of these other people that are exposing this for what it is. The fact is, these pathogens are going to attack a weak immune system. That's how they survive. Okay? And if you don't have a strong immune system, wearing a mask will protect you from getting it. If you have a strong immune system, and listen, I've never taken a flu vaccine. I'm going to be in my 6th decade in a couple of months. I've never had the flu my entire life. I've had chicken pox, scarlet fever, meningitis, mono. I've had a lot of pathogens in my body, and I'm still here. Probably due to the fact that I take care of myself and I boost my immune system with the knowledge that I have with respect to biochemistry, okay, and immunology. And I don't expect everybody to know these things, and I don't want to stick my neck out on that. But it's worked well for me, and so that's what I'm saying. So basically, I'm falsificating this argument that says you don't need to wear a mask, that it's not going to help you. That's wrong. I have a reason why I think they're telling you that. But you know what? If I had the opportunity to stand in front of them, I'd tell them straight up to their face. I'd ask them the hard questions. But like I said, I'm only one man. I'm not in that position. All I can do is protect myself and try to communicate to other people how to find the truth with respect to this current situation. So, until next time, think free and be free.